So welcome back to the channel, and today I'm finally diving into a case that I bought 2 years ago at a thrift store for $10. That's right, $10. In my experience, this was probably the worst case that was ever made. Although innovative for the time that it came out, really cool, great ideas, and now that we have glass, tempered glass, and the whole open fish tank concept case, this was the beginning of it, because this is where I guess the idea all started, and now case manufacturers taking that idea, and I would say that even though I'm not a huge fan of those type of cases, they've improved on it and they've done it right. Number one, you have tempered glass, which is more durable than this, and number two, it's better reinforced. Now this is all clear acrylic, obviously, but the way it was designed, the way it was put together, if you were not careful with these cases, moved them the wrong way, they would break very easily. Now, although, and we'll take a closer look at it in just a sec, the acrylic was pretty thick, getting these cases was a pain. I remember years ago, I went with a customer. They used to have this thing called computer shows. Computer shows were conventions where vendors got together and they would sell their computer stuff. All the computer stores local, before you wound up with Best Buys and Micro Centers and all that type of stuff, they would get together. It was local stores. They'd bring all their stuff. They'd sell it. They'd give you a good deal. If you paid them cash, you got an even better deal. And that was pretty awesome. And they would sell cases like this. I mean, of course, you had all different types of cases, but these were the highlights, and this is going back to the early 2000s that I can remember, and maybe this goes back a little earlier to that, but I'm talking about like early 2000s when I started seeing these cases with, I gotta say, the Athlon 64, Thunderbirds, Durons, somewhere around that time frame. Don't quote me 100%, I'm just going by from my memory and my experience with it. You would see these cases complete build with the motherboard, and this is back when motherboards had a lot of different colors. Now everything is so neutral. And you would have the cold cathodes, I believe they were called, and they would just highlight and show the hardware. It was really cool and definitely an awesome design. But this case came with a catch. Number one, if they weren't shipped or packaged properly, the issue that we would run into was that you would take the case, you bring it home, and if it was dropped in shipping or if they didn't store it properly, number one, they would get cracked. I couldn't tell you how many times that I'd have customers buy these cases, and this is going back to early 2000s. Shoot, I was in high school during that time. We'd open up the case and it was cracked or it was broken because it got damaged, or better yet, because it came in a flat box, people would stack things on it and it would damage the case. So that was one issue that you ran into the case. The other issue is if the manufacturer didn't protect the panels with sheets or plastics around it, it would get scratched. And in shipping, if there was a piece that wasn't fully protected in plastic, it would just rub during shipping, and then you would get these rub marks. Don't know if you could kind of see it, and we'll zoom into it later, but like this one has a rub mark over here, and it has a rub mark right over there. So even though a cool case, when you'd go and buy it, it was highly recommended that if you were in the parking lot or even right there, you would open it up, inspect the panels, make sure it was good to go, and then bring it back and assemble with it. And that was some of the issues that we ran into it. Now, obviously there's some more issues with this case, and we're gonna take a better look and dive into it. But in today's video, we're gonna go over all those things, and we're gonna put a modernish build in it and see what was the experience in building this case, what are the thermals, and how decent-ish they could look. So let's put it on the bench and let's dive in. Now, there's not a lot of information to be found on the internet about this. The more I look at this case, it's kind of ugly, but I guess it fits the style of the time period. But anywho's, so another issue that we ran into these cases was sunlight. I had a customer. We put this computer together. He kept the computer in a well-lit area, which, is nice during the day, but the sun had its effect, and I think it was like 6 months, it yellowed the panel that it reflected on. This one does have some yellowing. I don't think it's from the sun. I just think it's from the years, as old as this thing is. So when you build in this case, you gotta make sure it wasn't in direct sunlight. So that was something to keep in mind. And then the other thing too that I would see is the smokers. Nothing against you guys who do that. This case will just attract and absorb the yellow nicotine from the smokers. And you'd see a bunch of those cases and they'd yellow, and no matter how much you wiped it, it would not come out. And then if you wiped it too much, you would dull it out. So two common issues that I saw with it. And then going back into what I was talking about earlier with the shipping, you would get this rub mark right there where something would just rub against it. So yeah, and then obviously we have the scratches and all that type of good stuff. But it was pretty thick, I think, don't quote me and I'll correct it on the screen, like maybe 1/4 of an inch, which was good for the acrylics. But the other issue with this case was these pieces right over here. So now these were these pressed in fittings over here, and over time they would wear out, and then you weren't able to screw anything in. So then you would have to glue it, and then if you didn't use the right glue, it'd create more damage. So that was the other part. And then just because the way it was built, if you had to tighten it just right, if you tightened it too much, you could cause a stress crack, which looked horrible. But you wanted to get it tight enough where it just didn't move. Now this one is actually pretty good because I actually went ahead and tightened these things properly. But this would wallow out, and then you had these 3 points, 1, 2, 3, and then these things would just wiggle back and forth. Fortunately, this one is sturdy, and it wasn't over tightened, but something to keep in mind. So another issue that we'd run into with these cases was finding parts for them. So now, as you can see, I don't have the covers for the 5 1/4 bays, and I'll probably never find them. I did look online to see if I could find them, but you know, they're gone, unobtainium, you know, long lost and forgotten on it. But I'm missing all this over here, so if I wanted to make this a practical build, which I was not, I'd have these 3 blank spots, and either I could try to cut something and make it work, but then let's see if I can find it. You'd have these little, I guess they were brass, but these brass insert with these washers, which would squeeze in right over here and create pressure to hold it in place. And then in this case, we're stuck with gold. They did make like the silver versions of it, which looked a lot nicer, but this one is the gold one. So that's one issue that you'd run into. And another fun part was the customers who didn't keep the hardware or would throw out the box. So as you can see, we have a 5 1/4 inch drive, and it fits properly. And this is where it got really fun. If you didn't put it in carefully and you put it at the right angle, you'd create a scratch, and obviously you would see the scratch over here. So in this case, we pop it right over here. But as you can see, the issue that we run into, because this acrylic was a 1/4 inch thick, you'd have to have long enough special screws for it. So that was the other issue that I would have. So I'd have somebody that come in and say, hey, I need to install another hard drive, or I'm gonna add another DVD drive so I can make legal backups, you know, all that type of stuff. And we couldn't do it. So typically we'd have to go down to the hardware store, try to measure, and yeah, that was another disaster with it. And I get it, because you don't want to make this thing thin because of the acrylic, because it'd be very flimsy, but making it thicker, you had to make sure you kept all the hardware that came with it. Now going back into the front, taking a look at it, the other issue with this thing was airflow, which was terrible. So you had an 80 millimeter up here, 80 millimeter up here, and another one up here. Now on the front tempered acrylic, you did have provisions for 2 80 millimeter fans, which, I mean, I get it. But back then, 80 millimeter fans, you know, they weren't as efficient. So either you got one that was really loud and just didn't blow a lot of airflow on it, and these things were hot boxes. I did a build years ago when we were building in these cases, the Athlon Thunderbird. Those chips ran hot as it was, and then a case like this, all you had were these little fans just blowing air here, here. You were lucky if you were able to get some air over here. And then the other issue that you had was you put in all these fans, all these wirings and everything, there's no cable management. So typically you have to get these plastic hold downs to kind of route the cables all cleanly. But even then, cable management, I guess it wasn't a big thing back then, but it was terrible in this case. There was nowhere to hide it. So you would have to spend a lot of time making your build look clean. So those were the common issues that I ran into when I was building with these cases, and it was one of those things that people loved it at first, but then hated this case later on. And it never failed. People would hate this case later on because they would over tighten something, you get a stress crack, you get a scratch on it very easily, the yellowing, all those types of issues. And my favorite, and this was the one that I love, was that they would lose the hardware and the screws and they could not add to it. They would have to try to hunt them down at Lowe's, or what was it back then? I can't remember what we had back then. I think it was called Rickles, where I grew up in, and this is going back early 2000s. And there was another hardware store, and they didn't have the variety as you have today, like if you go to Lowe's or Home Depot. So that was not fun. But hey, it looked good at first, but when it was time to upgrade years later, you ran into issues. So I'm gonna build in it. And obviously I did have to go to Home Depot, no, Lowe's. I did have to go to Lowe's to get some screws because of the power supply. So let's show you the hardware that we're gonna pop in. So of course, because I got a bunch of these cheap, and you'll see a bunch of these power supplies in videos, 1,000-watt power supply. I paid $40 for these EVGA 1,000-watt power supplies. Got 4 of them for $40 a piece, steal of a deal, great power supplies. And they did have the essential cables, which is 2 PCIEs, CPU connector, 2 SATA, so plenty of connectors where I don't have to go out and buy extra. So we'll be popping one of those in there. But like I talked about, this is pretty thick, so I had to go to the Lowe's computer store and pick up these screws. These are 6-2 by 1/2 inch. It was pretty cheap. It's like $1.97, but that gives me enough length so I could at least mount in my power supply. But I don't think I got the proper thread pitch for the DVD drive. But you know what they say, cross threads are better than no threads. I don't know. I got plenty of DVD drives, so we might sacrifice one just for the aesthetic. We'll see. For our cooler, AMD Ryzen, this one because I have it lying around. And we're gonna pop in this Gigabyte. It's a B450 Aorus Ryzen 2700X. This was the computer that the customer was scared of because the power supply went boop. So, and I think, well, I'm gonna have to find one, but we'll run an M.2, and that will actually clean this up a lot better. Instead of having all these drives, we can get rid of these gold standoffs and try to make this thing look better as we can without the stuff that we need, if that makes sense. So we'll see on that. I did get some RGB just to add some flair, a couple of FPSs. So what I'm gonna do is switch to the build montage, and when we come back, either this thing is gonna look really good or really bad, or eh. So we'll see. Well, there's the finished product. Not too bad. Obviously the aesthetic, most of the issue is going to be the condition of this case. It's scratched, it has rub marks, it's yellowed a little bit. I mean, it is what it is. It's an old case, I think, what, 2005? 5 is one of the dates I could put on this type of cases. So what, over 20-year-old case, 20-year-old acrylic. So, I mean, you're gonna get what you get. This stuff is durable, but not durable for the aesthetics. So just kind of keep that in mind. And this was the experience back then. When I would go into those computer shows, conventions, you would see a case like this with a system and a whole bunch of blinky lights. And obviously they would have the 80 millimeters that had the, you know, fancy color lights and all that type of stuff. But this was it. Building in this case, not the worst, not the terrible, but if you don't have the right screw lengths or anything, that does make it difficult. And then you have to make multiple trips to the hardware store to try to find it. So that's one issue. Cable management, and we're gonna look closer into it. You do the best you can with what you have. But the modern takeaway that helps us with this is, number one, modular power supply. So all the other cables I don't need, we could delete on them. We don't need a DVD drive. We don't need a mechanical hard drive. Shoot, we don't even need a SATA drive, the 2.5 SATA drives. So yeah, makes it a lot cleaner, a little easier to build in. So let's go ahead, let's look at the temperatures and then we'll take a closer look at this. So to give us the full experience of how restricted the airflow in this case was or is, I went ahead and filled these up. Now obviously newer cases you have airflow, you know, panels with ventilation, all that type of stuff, but this we do not. So I have 3 DVD drives, they're not connected. And then I found this was pretty cool. Little storage box, you know, could put your stuff in it. Got 2 screws. That's kind of cool. Don't make stuff like that anymore. But anyways, in the front, I have an 80 millimeter. These are Thermalright fans. I got one in the back, 80 millimeter as well. So intake here, exhaust there, itty bitty. I did want to put one up here, but the power supply is a little too big. But not only that, I could have put one over here, but I ran out of splitters for the fan. So definitely time to stock up. So we're at idle 36, 34, spikes up to 49.9. I mean, it's a Ryzen 7 2700X, and we're using that AMD fancier cooler. I forget what it's called, but we're using that cooler. So let's go ahead, let's hit some Cinebench, let it run for a little bit, and see how toasty she gets. So running the test, we're about 6 minutes, and I'm sure it's gonna keep going up, but not as bad. It's eventually gonna balance out. So we're at 79.3 degrees Celsius, probably hit about 80 or 82 if we was to finish this test, but she's getting toasty. Those little 80 millimeters, they're going 100% full beans. They're probably struggling to kind of keep up and getting rid of all that heat, but like I said, lack of airflow. And probably if we were to put 2 80 millimeters over here and another one over here, we could get more air circulating and that would help it. But I mean, that's what you got when you got this case. Typically I see them with a front and a rear and a top. I've never seen them, the ones that we used to buy, I never saw them with the 2 over here. Maybe that was just different versions of the case. Not 100% sure, but I'm sure it would help. So for our graphics card, I just popped in an EVGA GTX 1080. I've been running this Furmark at 1080p settings for about 5 minutes, and our temperatures, 68, 69 degrees Celsius. That's probably where it's gonna stay at. Let's go ahead, let's open this thing up. Let's take a deeper look inside, show a little bit of the cable management or an attempt. So let's pop this out, just like so. Now it has 4 screws, but I only put 2 in because, well, I knew I was gonna open it up. So taking a look at it, one of the things that I don't like, and maybe it's just because of the weight of the power supply, but then again, it's pretty secure for the most part. You see how it kind of has that sag and it's not even? It could be the flex in the plastic, but I don't like that. That don't look too good to me. Now, as far as cable management, I mean, it's not as bad as I thought, and I could clean this up a lot better. And I'll be honest with you guys, I just really didn't feel like dealing with the headache of cable management with this PC. I was able to tuck them behind this drive cage area over here, which kind of cleans up the front. Now the power supply too, there's a gap in the back, and I'll show you guys the back. But in the back, I was able to tuck the CPU power connector up there. So it cleans it up a little bit. Yes, some zip ties could probably make this look a lot nicer and better. Same thing over here for the RGB, but you're kind of doing the best that you have with what you got. So, I mean, it is what it is. Now, one thing I did notice about this case is because it's all wide over here, and typically this part is thinner for the cases for the smaller drives. Because it's wider, you actually have more options for a graphics card, so that's kind of cool. So like I was talking about, you're just kind of able to tuck the wires in over here, and like I said, you could clean them up with some wire ties. It wouldn't look too bad. Same thing with the CPU power connector right over here, just tucked in, it works. I mean, it's kind of cool because you get to see the back of your motherboard. That's not something you commonly see, not that there's anything to look at, but this one's got RGB in the back, so that's kind of cool. Now for the front, I mean, I just don't get it. It has like these, you know, gold brass looking inserts and screws, but then you got this silver looking power button. I mean, they could have made that match. I did build in ones that these were silver, so it does look a lot better and cleaner. Not too much a fan of the gold, so I mean, to each their own. Now, I don't know how well this comes out on camera, but if you look, I had to remove the standoff that was right over there. So another issue that I saw with these cases was that they weren't machined or cut properly, however the process is. So the standoff is actually off to the side a little bit. And I saw that happen a lot when we used to do builds like that. Sometimes you would get lucky and the motherboard just would not line up with the screws and all that type of stuff. And yeah, it was a big disaster. Every now and then I would find one that we would build in, and then everything would line up and look pretty good. But obviously this one, they put the screw a little too short to the left. It's unfortunate, but I mean, that was another thing they had to deal with these type of cases. So I remember when these cases first came out, we used to go to computer conventions. It was really cool. They were at hotels, you know, their boardrooms, their meeting rooms, or sometimes they had some big ones at convention centers where they had indoor and outdoor stuff. And all these vendors would get together with all their stuff that they were selling from their shops, and they would either buy a pre-built custom that they did, or you could buy the parts and build your own computer. And it was really cool. And the cool thing about it was that, you know, there was haggle room to negotiate. Obviously, cash was king. If you paid with cash, you got a way better deal. And then if you bought in either bulk or you bought multiple parts together, like if the motherboard was 100 and the graphic card was 100, for $200, you offered him 160 cash, he would take the deal. It was pretty awesome. And I remember going to the first convention and I saw this type of case. Everybody had it on their tables with their builds and custom lightings and strobes and custom cables and wiring and all that type of stuff. And they were $69.99. And then if you paid an extra $20, they would sell you one that was pre-assembled, ready to go. And then another way that they would reel you in is that you would see their cool builds, so now you want to make yours cool, and then you would spend $69.99 on the case to put it together for yourself, and then they would have the grills for it, and the custom fans, and the strobes, and the lights, and all that type of stuff. So then by the time you walked out, you probably spent $150 to $200 on your case just to make it look cool. And then you still haven't bought all the components. I guess much hasn't really changed since then. But anyways, the cases were good in the beginning, but then after that, I mean, unless you kept the hardware and kept on top of this thing and kept it in, you know, garage type condition, like comparing it to a car, they would not hold up well. If you find one in great condition, it could be a fun little build. You can make it modern and, you know, probably do some things to make it more practical. So with all that being said, comment down below, let me know your thoughts, concerns, criticisms. Did you ever get to build in one of these cases? And what was your experiences if you did own one? And if you've been around with computers long enough, how far down the computer modding rabbit hole did you go back then? If you like this video, definitely hit the like button, subscribe if you're not, and as always, we'll see what we come up with next.